Facebook wants all your photos for AI. An update to the Android 16 custom ROM situation. Definitely want to update you on that one. A major printer vulnerability and more. Welcome to Surveillance Report 231, where we are dedicated to keeping you private and secure with the latest news in the past week. I am Henry from Techlore.
I'm Nathan from The New Oil.
Before we get into the Facebook highlight story, want to quickly shout out our sponsor of the week, which is EasyOptOuts. EasyOptOuts is a web service that allows you to remove your data from people searching websites. This actually made a lot of news recently with the Minnesota shooter because they were using people searching websites to try to locate the addresses of politicians. This really finally shed a little bit more light on this really exploitive industry, and one of the best services that's been shown to be effective by both Consumer Reports and privacy guides is EasyOptOuts. They pretty much were tied with another service, but EasyOptOuts is only $20 a year, which is significantly less than that other service. On top of that, cancellation is easy. They have refunds if you're not satisfied. They ask for very minimal information, so you just give them what you want to give them to give as effective as an experience as you need. And also, they don't do ads or analytics, and they don't do anything weird. Like, a lot of these services try to have different plans, and they try to structure things in a really weird and confusing way. EasyOptOuts, just everybody $20 a year. It's very straightforward. They only have 2 employees, no third parties, and they only submit data to sites that already have your data, because some of these just essentially send it to everybody and just hope that something happens. But this one, they check all the sites first, and then they send it to them, and then they remove it. I've been using EasyOptOuts for a long time. I really don't have a better recommendation, especially for the value. So it really, to me, is kind of a no-brainer. And it's something that, especially if you're in the US, they're US only, it's something that will really automate the whole process of keeping your data off of people searching websites. So check it out down in the description. And I definitely want to give a massive thank you to EasyOptOuts for sponsoring this podcast. A great service that I love and would recommend to all my friends and family. And now going into the highlight story. So Facebook is starting to ask people to use Meta AI on photos in your camera roll that you haven't shared yet. The way this works is they're going in and they're asking you for access to your phone's camera roll to then automatically suggest AI edited versions of your photos, including ones that haven't even been uploaded or used for Facebook. The feature is being suggested to Facebook users when they're creating a new story on the social networking app. And in that, a screen pops up and asks if the user will opt into cloud processing to allow creative suggestions. So this is the big thing to watch out for if you're using Facebook for whatever reason. So as the pop-up message explains, by clicking allow, you will let Facebook generate new ideas from your camera roll, like collages, recaps, AI, restylings, or photo themes. To work, Facebook says it will upload media from your camera roll to its cloud, meaning its servers, on an ongoing basis, based on information like time, location, or themes. The message also notes that only you can see the suggestions and the media isn't used for ad targeting. However, by tapping allow, you are agreeing to Meta's AI terms of service. This allows your media and facial features to be analyzed by AI. The company will additionally use the data and presence of people or objects in your photos to craft its creative ideas. This is very on brand for Facebook. This takes me back to an incident with Facebook where they were also, you could have used, and I think you still can to this day, you can use Facebook Messenger as also your SMS app on Android, so you can have all your messages in one place. And it was found that Facebook was actually collecting data from your SMS messages outside of technically like the Facebook Messenger messages, if that makes sense. This is a very similar situation where even photos that you wouldn't even be uploading or using for Facebook, perhaps sensitive things that you want private and just stored on your phone locally, they're also trying to get training or just access to those photos for different things. And this is very concerning. And this is just very Facebook. And there is no, in my view, benefit to the way they did this. They could do this in a much more privacy respecting way. But I think that's kind of the goal here. The goal here is to get people to say allow and then just give Facebook ability to do whatever they want from there. So if you are a Facebook user, do not allow this. And honestly, my suggestion for even people in my life, if they're using Facebook for whatever reason, they shouldn't have the ability to do this because ideally you don't have Facebook installed on a device. You can use Facebook perfectly well in the web. And that is applicable to mobile and desktop. You can add the Facebook web app as something that you can add to your home screen, and it overall functions pretty similar to the actual app, but it gives a lot less permissions and it's much harder to fingerprint users. And you can also do things like even ad blocking potentially in your browser. So definitely check that out if you are a Facebook user and want a way to just dodge all of this stuff altogether.
You kind of hit the big thing I was going to say, which is try to avoid using the app if you can. You made a lot of really good points there. One of my more recent but still older videos is about PWAs, and it kind of explains how the browser acts as an additional layer of security when you do things that way. So even if it's not as a PWA, just using Facebook in the browser is definitely better than the app in terms of privacy and security. The main thing I want to point out is Facebook is notorious for changing their mind. When they bought WhatsApp, they said there would never be ads, and now there's ads. When they bought Oculus, they said you would never need a Facebook account. Now you need a Facebook or a Meta account, whatever, splitting hairs. They're notorious for like rolling something out and being like, no, this is fine. You're going to have this freedom and this choice and this privacy options and this, that, and the other. But 6 months, 12 months, 18, so on down the road, they change it. So even if they say they're not using it for ads now, just go ahead. I know I've said this a lot lately. Bookmark this clip, timestamp it, whatever, save it to your computer because they will start using it for ads at some point. The last thing I want to point out is if for some reason you do have to use the app, on iOS and Android, this is becoming a more common thing. I think on Android, the app has to opt into it, but I think on iOS, it's pretty across the board. You should have the option to only allow access to certain photos. So if you have to use the app for some reason and you want to upload a photo and this pops up, try to see if there's that option to only upload certain photos, and that way it doesn't have access to your entire camera roll.
Last thing is, even if you're not a Facebook user, use this story as a lesson to just go into your phone's permissions and check the photo permissions and see which apps have full photo access to like all your photos and see if there's any there, because Facebook in some ways actually is making this very obvious, but they don't have to do it this way. This could be something like, let's say Snapchat. You'll open Snapchat for the first time that day, and then it says, oh, we've updated our terms and conditions. You just say, oh, okay. But turns out the terms and conditions is, oh, we can now start training all the photos that you give access to us. You know, that's how subtle some of this stuff can be. So just like check out the apps that have full photo access and just set it to limited for anything that could be suspicious. I would add any social media or big tech company to that list personally.
On that note, we will go ahead and roll right into the data breaches. Our first one comes from Oxford City Council, who suffered a breach exposing 2 decades of data. The incident has also caused an ICT service disruption, although most of the impacted systems have been brought back online. This article is a little bit older, from earlier in the week, so maybe all the services are back online at this point. I'm not sure. They did mention there is some backlog. I'm assuming if you're in Oxford, you're probably somewhat aware of this. The Oxford City Council is, of course, the local government authority responsible for managing critical public services such as housing, planning, waste collection, environmental health, and elections in Oxford, England. And they said that they have now identified that people who worked for the City Council administered elections between 2001 and 2022, including poll station workers and ballot counters, may have had some personal details accessed.
McLaren Healthcare says data breach impacts 743,000 patients. This is a nonprofit health system in the US that has over $6 billion in annual revenue. And they operate mostly in Michigan hospitals. This data breach notification sample submitted to U.S. authorities confirms that full names were exposed, redacting other data types that were exposed. Therefore, the full extent of the data breach remains unclear. This is actually the second major breach that they've suffered in recent years, with the previous one occurring in July of 2023. And this was part of the Alpha Black Cat ransomware group. In that older case, the cybercriminals stole sensitive medical data, personally identifiable information, and SSNs of 2.2 million people.
And our last data breach this week comes from retail giant Ahold Delhaize, who says that a data breach affected 2.2 million people. This is a company that has reported net sales of over $104 billion last year and operates under a wide range of brands such as Food Lion, Stop & Shop, Giant Food, and Hannaford in the American market. And in Europe, they operate as Delhaize, Maxi, Mega Image, Albert, Boll, Alpha, Beta, Gal & Gal, and Profi. The company said that the stolen items vary for each affected individual and that the stolen documents contain a combination of personal information, such as name, contact info, like postal and email address and phone number, date of birth, government-issued ID, such as social security, passport, and driver's license numbers, financial account information, aka bank account numbers, health information, specifically for like workers' comp and medical information contained in employment records, and employment-related information.
And now we're going to head into company news, and we're going to start with Microsoft, who has rolled out Windows security changes to prevent another CrowdStrike meltdown. To remind people who forgot or who are new to the podcast and didn't hear about this, CrowdStrike was a thing from last summer, and it was a nightmare for network administrators worldwide, because what essentially happened is a Windows update with CrowdStrike broke just Windows. This event caused billions of dollars in direct and indirect damages. It was entirely preventable, and it did things like impact yours truly when they were flying because Delta couldn't figure it out. And Delta literally had to delay like 3 days of flights, I think, total, as a result of the CrowdStrike meltdown. Anyway, Microsoft had a security summit bringing together technical experts from CrowdStrike and its competitors in the endpoint security software business, and that meeting led to an announcement late last year of a new set of safe deployment practices and some changes to the architecture of Windows desktop and server products, with the goal of preventing a similar incident from ever happening again. Today, the company announced that some of those Windows Resiliency Initiative features are about to go live. The biggest change is one that the majority of security experts had recommended, which is moving third-party security drivers out of the Windows kernel, where a flaw could cause a catastrophic crash, and running them in a user space instead. Now, a second major change that we'll be rolling out soon is the availability of the Quick Machine Recovery, QMR feature. One of the most painful aspects of the CrowdStrike failure was that it caused affected machines to go into a restart loop that could only be fixed by sending a technician to physically start the machine in the Windows recovery environment and remove the faulty driver. With QMR, Microsoft can use its update service to fix the issue automatically on their ends. And a final related security change promises to fix a long-standing annoyance with Windows security updates, which is the need to restart a system to apply the fixes. Network administrators can now use Windows Auto Patch to deploy hot patch updates on PCs running Windows 11 Enterprise without requiring a restart more than once every 3 months.
Just a quick, at the beginning, I think you said Windows pushed out an update, and that's what caused all of this. It was CrowdStrike pushed out the update. Next story, Android 16 can warn you that you might be connected to a fake cell tower. Upcoming devices launching with Android 16 will support version 3.0 of Android's, I think that's iRadio HAL. Google is reintroducing the mobile network security setting page in the Safety Center under Settings and Security and Privacy. This page contains 2 subsections. The first one is Notifications. This subsection contains a network notifications toggle. When enabled, it allows the system to warn you if your device connects to an unencrypted network or when the network requests your phone's unique identifiers. This toggle is disabled by default in Android 16. The other section is Network Generation. This subsection features a 2G network protection toggle that enables or disables the device's 2G connectivity. This is the same toggle found in the main SIM settings menu and is also disabled by default in Android 16. When the network notifications feature is enabled, Android will post a message in the notifications panel and the safety center whenever your device switches from an encrypted to an unencrypted network or vice versa. It will also post an alert in both places when the network accesses your phone's unique identifiers, detailing the time and number of times they were requested. That's actually kind of a common thing for even legitimate cell phone towers to do, because that's just how they work, is they need your what is it, IMEI or IMSI in order to verify service and capabilities and stuff like that, and like who your carrier is. It says, now that Google has relaunched the security page in Android 16, it won't be long before we start seeing it on devices. However, due to the Google Requirements Freeze, or GRF program, a policy that allows OEMs to lock in hardware-related requirements for the devices at launch, it's unlikely that any current devices will be updated to support the notifications feature. We will most likely have to wait for upcoming devices that launch with Android 16, such as the Pixel 10 series, to see this protection fully implemented.
AdGuard is a company, and they do a lot of privacy and security stuff, and they released AdGuard Mail version 1, which is email replies, new domains, improvements, and subscriptions. So we've talked about this. This is their aliasing service. Now you can also reply to them. So this is starting to become more like simple login, essentially. So they added 2 new alias domains. You can pick the one that works best for you. They have monthly or yearly subscriptions, and they only have 2 tiers, which is free and full, currently $3 a month or $19 a year on sale.
Next up, we have a new browser for iOS. This is called Psylo, Psylo, and it tries to obscure digital fingerprints by giving every tab its own IP address. Psylo for iOS and iPadOS was created by Misk, who is a name we have mentioned quite a bit here. They are a cybersecurity researcher, a Canada-based app biz run by software developers and security researchers Talal Haj Bakri and Tommy Misk. They said this is why we call tabs silos. It applies unique anti-fingerprinting measures per silo, such as canvas randomization. So it does more than just IP address stuff. They say this way, two silo tabs opening the same website would appear as though they originated on two different devices to said website. The browser maker also relies on their own MISC private proxy network to mask the IP address of each silo. They said we designed the system so that the network traffic is always transferred in encrypted channels. An attacker intercepting silo traffic at any point will only see encrypted data. Silo uses encrypted TLS channels for communication, and it blocks plain text HTTP traffic. We can't read the data that our users send and receive. The company claims Silo therefore offers better privacy than a VPN because the VPN masks the user's IP address, but generally don't alter the data used for fingerprinting. Silo, for example, will adjust the browser's time zone and browser language to match the geolocation of each proxy, resulting in more entropy that means fingerprints created by gathering data from the silos will appear to be different. The dev post states that some privacy-focused browsers like Brave also implement anti-fingerprinting measures like canvas randomization, but those are more effective on the desktop Mac OS due to Apple's iOS restrictions. They claim that they were able to achieve better results on iOS by using a client-side JavaScript solution. MISC designed Silo to minimize the information available to its maker. It doesn't log personally identifiable information or browsing data that the curious could use to identify the user. The company notes that they do not have customer payment information, which is handled by Apple. There are no user accounts, only randomized identifiers to indicate active subscriptions. According to Tommy, the only subscriber data kept is bandwidth usage, which is necessary to prevent abuse. And they said that they only keep that for the current month and the last 2 months. So a 3-month window, basically. Silo is available for iOS and iPad OS. The company could create an Android version if the iOS version proves popular, and in the US, it costs $9 a month or $99 a year. I did ask them on Mastodon if they had any plans to open source the browser. They said that they were discussing it.
So now we're going to go into politics. There was no research this last week. WhatsApp has been banned on House staffers' devices. So the Office of Cybersecurity has deemed WhatsApp a high risk to users due to the lack of transparency in how it protects user data, absence of stored data encryption, and potential security risks involved with its use. House staff are not allowed to download or keep the WhatsApp application on any House device, including any mobile, desktop, or web browser versions of its product. If you have a WhatsApp application on your House managed device, you will be contacted to remove it. A spokesperson for Meta said, "We disagree with the characterization in the strongest possible terms. Messages on WhatsApp are end-to-end encrypted by default. This is a higher level of security than most of the apps on the approved list that do not offer that protection." They said that Microsoft Teams, Wicker, Signal, iMessage, and FaceTime are all acceptable alternatives to WhatsApp.
So the U.S. Supreme Court has upheld Texas's porn ID law. We have covered this story so far, so I felt like we needed to cover the conclusion. On Friday, in a 6-3 decision that could reshape the landscape of online privacy and free speech, the Supreme Court upheld in full the Texas age verification law, one of the first passed in the country, which requires many websites publishing pornographic content to check that all visitors are over 18. The law says that sites that are, quote, more than 1/3 sexual material, unquote, can face fines of up to $10,000 per day if they don't put in place age verification systems, plus extra penalties of up to $250,000. It also states websites should display health warnings about the potential risks of pornography. Writing for the majority, Justice Clarence Thomas said that because the law, quote, simply requires proof of age to access content that is obscene to minors, it does not directly regulate adults' protected speech, adding adults have no First Amendment right to avoid age verification. In recent years, a wave of age verification laws have been proposed in states across the country. More than half of U.S. states have passed or have tried to pass age verification laws. So this is a quote from a professor of law at the University of Akron, and this was given before the decision was made. Efforts to regulate online pornography are often the opening move in broader campaigns to censor the internet. While this case focuses on mandatory age verification for adult content, state lawmakers are hoping it provides legal foundation to impose sweeping restrictions on a wide range of online material.
Canada says Salt Typhoon hacked telecom firm via Cisco flaw. So the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity and the FBI confirmed that the Chinese state-sponsored Salt Typhoon hacking group is also targeting Canadian telecommunication firms. And this flaw was first disclosed in October of 2023 when it was reported that threat actors had exploited it as a zero-day to hack over 10,000 devices. Despite a significant period having passed, at least one major telecommunications provider in Canada still hadn't patched, giving Salt Typhoon an easy way to compromise devices. Salt Typhoon attacks have impacted multiple telecom companies in dozens of countries, including AT&T, Verizon, Lumen, Charter Communications, Consolidated Communications, and Windstream. Last week, they also confirmed that Salt Typhoon had breached them, which is a Viasat, but customer data was not impacted.
Next one is a quick signal boost from the EFF. It says California's Corporate Cover-Up Act is a privacy nightmare. EFF says California lawmakers are pushing one of the most dangerous privacy rollbacks we've seen in years. SB 690, what we're calling the Corporate Cover-Up Act, is a brazen attempt to let corporations spy on us in secret, gutting long-standing protections without a shred of accountability. Simply put, SB 690 is a blatant attack on digital privacy and is written to eviscerate long-standing privacy laws and legal safeguards Californians rely on. If passed, it would 1. Gut California's Invasion of Privacy Act, CIPA, a law that protects us from being secretly recorded or monitored. 2. Legalize corporate wiretaps, allowing companies to intercept real-time clicks, calls, and communications. 3. Authorize pen registers and trap and trace tools, which track who you talk to, when, and how without consent. And 4. Let companies use all of the surveillance data for, quote, commercial business purposes with zero notice and no legal consequences. They go on to say this is not a small fix, it's a sweeping rollback of hard-won privacy protections, the kind that helped expose serious abuses by companies like Facebook, Google, and Oracle.
Indonesia signs wiretapping pacts with telecom operators. Indonesia's Attorney General Office has signed an agreement with 4 telecommunication operators to install wiretapping devices, and they said that this would allow prosecutors to access telecommunication recordings and enable data exchange for law enforcement purposes. The police and anti-graft agency are already able to use wiretapping. The new arrangement with the Attorney General Office would allow prosecutors to use surveillance even on the grounds of suspicion without formal charges or legally named suspects in an investigation. The Attorney General Office spokesperson responded to the privacy concerns and said the office will only wiretap fugitives. When asked about the extent of the wiretapping powers, they said the act would not be done arbitrarily.
With that, we'll move into the free and open source software section, and we have some pretty exciting news all around this week, actually. We're going to start off with Brave, who now has an official F-Droid repo available. This is a third-party repo, and they say just like with our official Linux packages, we maintain our own repo as a way for users to integrate Brave into their operating systems while ensuring that updates are delivered promptly to users and that only fully supported versions of Brave are available through these repos. They say at the moment, some features like their VPN, Leo, and rewards require a Google account on Android. So I think those are mostly paid features.
On the topic of Android, so CalyxOS put out a blog post, and it's in reference to, was it last week or the week before, the Android 16?
I think it was 2 weeks ago, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, and like kind of the, potential drawbacks coming for custom ROMs coming soon. Anyway, Calyx will continue to support pixels, but development will slow down as they need to reverse engineer, kind of like what we talked about. They note that they've already been doing this for other devices like Motorola's and Fairphones, so it's nothing super new to them. The only part of concern here is that our users will see a hiatus in our usual schedule with respect to security and general updates. They hope to have it out by Android 16 QPR1, which is expected to be in September.
The next one is exciting news from Proton Pass. They say you can now store passports, Wi-Fi codes, SSH keys, and more. You can choose from 14 new item types, including medical records, Wi-Fi settings, and driver's licenses, or create your own fully customizable item if you need something unique. You can choose and name as many fields and sections as you need. Once created, you can share and pin these custom items or view their version history, just like with standard items. If you can't fit information into a custom item, you can load the create a file attachment for any type of file up to 10 gigs.
Firefox 140 arrives with ESR status, so this is an extended support release. This is important because this is going to be essentially the new default with many Linux distros, and this is what they're going to ship with. So some downstream projects like Waterfox also depend on the ESR version, and many enterprise software systems are only tested against ESR. So when features are dropped, like support for older operating systems or Flash, ESR keeps that functionality around for longer. And speaking of old operating systems, if you're using Windows 7, 8.1, or Mac OS from 10.12 to 10.15, note that Firefox ESR 115 will continue to receive patches until at least September 2025, which is the previous version.
I'll probably take the next two because they're pretty short. We have one last FOSS story, Cryptomator 1.17.0. Windows, say hello. What's new is Windows Hello integration, double-click to unlock vaults, and updated graphical framework and Java FX 24. What's fixed? WinFSP update, blue screen on Windows resolved, legacy vaults can be imported again. Those are the actual subsection headers. So I just went ahead and copied those because they kind of give you a quick snapshot of everything that's new. And then they say at the very end, what about Windows ARM? Unfortunately, the native ARM app for Windows must be postponed due to a bug in the JDK framework. We are working on a fix, but cannot announce a release date yet. And with that, we'll launch into our Misfits section, which we only have one story, kind of a bit of a signal boost. Brother printer bug in 689 models exposes default admin passwords. A total of 689 printer models from Brother, along with 53 other models from Fujifilm, Toshiba, and Konica Minolta, come with a default administrator password that remote attackers can generate. Even worse, there is no way to fix the flaw via firmware in existing printers. So the default password in the impacted devices is generated during manufacturing using a custom algorithm based on the device's serial number. And they actually walk through how to determine this in the article. Attackers can leak the serial number of the target printer using various methods or by exploiting CVE 2024-51977, which is a pre-existing vulnerability that I believe is unrelated. They can then use the algorithm to generate the default admin password and log in as admin. Although all flaws have been fixed in firmware updates made available by impacted manufacturers, the case with CVE 2024-51978 is complicated in terms of risk management. The vulnerability is rooted in the password generation logic used in hardware manufacturing, and hence any devices made before its discovery will have predictable passwords unless users change them. In general, it is recommended to restrict access to the printer's admin interfaces over unsecured protocols and external networks, and also we recommend changing default passwords.
I have my own story I'm adding here to the Misfits to round out the week. It's not actually really a story, but apparently the first 7 people now have a Neuralink implant. What was most interesting to me and why I'm bringing this up is the way that it communicates with the computer. Like, it allows people with the Neuralink to do things on a computer essentially with their mind. It uses Bluetooth. I just can't imagine, if someone were to come to me and go, hey, what's a technology that is just kind of permanently in your head, and that's how you have to communicate with the world from here on out? I just wouldn't pick Bluetooth. Now, I don't know what else they could have used, but I think my concerns here are yeah, it's just Bluetooth, and Bluetooth kind of like printers sucks. Not many people I know actually love Bluetooth. But B, the main important thing here is your phones, they have a Bluetooth chip in there, and it's tied to a specific, type of Bluetooth, like Bluetooth 5.1 or whatever version you're on. And Bluetooth has a lot of security vulnerabilities, and typically they fix those in future versions of Bluetooth, but you need to get a device that now has that new Bluetooth chip. But on a phone, it's whatever, right? You get a new phone every few years, and perhaps the time window of which there's a critical Bluetooth vulnerability on your phone, if there is one at all, is pretty slim. But this thing is supposed to stay in your head for a long time, and I'm just really curious, what in general, what their plan is for things like security vulnerabilities for a chip that's in your brain. Obviously in the Bluetooth side of things, but just in general. So I'm really curious what that's going to look like in the future, and not something I'm looking forward to exploring someday on this podcast. But that is it for the week. Facebook wants all your photos for who knows what reason, an update to the Android 16 custom ROM situation, a major printer vulnerability, and more. And now I'm going to let Nate talk about EasyOptOuts.
Yes, our sponsor, EasyOptOuts. So for those who don't know, this company is a data removal service. Many of you probably know by now, if you hop online and look up your name, your phone number, especially if you have a unique name, your email address, any of those relatively unique things, you can find, for many people, not everybody, but you can find a lot of your information just freely available on the internet. And you can take all this stuff down yourself, and it is very effective, but it also is kind of a full-time job that takes a lot of work, and you kind of have to keep doing it over and over unless you find some really advanced, clever ways to work around it, which we try to recommend minimizing that data in the first place, but things happen. At very least, some of these services can be really helpful to kind of get some of the low-hanging fruit and help you stay on top of it and reduce some of that workload. And EasyOptOuts is one of our favorites. They are very affordable at only $20 a year. And if you decide you're not satisfied with the work they did, they do offer refunds. They are effective. We have studies from Consumer Reports and privacy guides, and you can view both of those blog posts and see their methodology and the results they got. They ask for very minimal information. They're just trying to make sure that they have the right record, to make sure they're doing the right takedowns. So they're not asking for everything, and they're also not sharing the data around. There's only 2 employees. They're not using any third-party contractors or anything. There are no ads or analytics on the platform that could be scooping up your data like the Metapixel. They do not submit removal requests unless they find your data on the website. So a lot of these other companies will just spam your data to everyone and just say, take this down, whether they have the record or not. EasyOptOuts tries to find the evidence that the record is there first, and then if they find it, they submit a takedown request, but otherwise they just leave it alone. They are constantly adding new sites over time, and they do support business plans. So if you're a business owner or in a position to make that kind of call and you want to offer a small perk to your employees, definitely hit them up and work something out with them. And we are extremely grateful for their ongoing support for this show, and really grateful for the work they're doing to try and make it a little bit easier for people to stay on top of their privacy.
You can always find links to all the stories in the show notes. And you can also email us stories as well via our website if we miss something and you want us to cover it. And the final thing we want to ask is for you to share our podcast around. Make sure you're subscribed, share it around with friends and family. If there's a specific story that resonates with them, definitely share that along. And give us a rating if you're able to do that. So we want this podcast to reach as many people as possible, to spread the topic of privacy, keep people up to date, keep people safe, and you guys can be a big part of that solution. So thank you for all your support, and we'll see you all next week.